All right, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. As always, you are here with Dr. Fantasy and my co-host, the Fantasy Caveman. Today, we're going to be discussing the champion Milwaukee Bucks. Before we do that, I just want to remind everybody to make sure that you
Did they win the championship?
I've never heard of them, and I can't speak to whether they did or not. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you throw this video a like. We appreciate all the support. And if there's anything specifically you're looking for, feel free to drop us a comment and let us know how we're doing. So let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks a little bit. Going back to last season, they were 46-26, which was third in the Eastern Conference. And how funny was it that a year ago we were talking about whether or not Mike Budenholzer was going to be fired, and we're definitely not having that conversation anymore. So great
Nope.
year for Mike Budenholzer. I think he's safe for right now.
Yeah,
Um,
for now.
so they were a few random stats for them. They were sixth in offensive rating, 10th in defensive rating last year. They had the third highest 2-point percentage, so they were very effective in the paint. They had the seventh worst 3-point percentage, which I thought was kind of interesting. Defensively, they were kind of in the top 10 in almost every category. Nothing really stood out. So let's go to some individual leaders. Giannis led the way with 28.1 points. Chris Middleton with 20.4. Drew Holiday with 17.7. Rebounds, you had Giannis at 11, Bobby Portis at 7.1. Assists, Drew Holiday 6.1, Giannis at 5.9. Steals, Drew Holiday 1.6, Giannis 1.2, Middleton and DiVincenzo at 1.1. And then blocks, you had Brook Lopez at 1.5 and Giannis at 1.2. So, Caveman, being the wonderful, dedicated Bucks fan you are, who stood out to you last season in this mediocre year?
Yeah, tons of teams win championships every season. uh, I mean, this is tough. My team, I was impressed by everybody. But I think the name to throw out here is Bobby Portis. I mean, you can talk about Drew Holiday and having a full season in Milwaukee, which I will be the first one to admit when that trade was initially made a while back, I was questioning it because they did give up a decent amount to go get him, and they kind of gave up a lot of their future. But hey, I stand corrected. It paid off in the biggest possible way it could have paid off. It got them a championship, so I'm not complaining. I'm happy with it. But Bobby Portis is the name. I want to bring up. And Bobby Portis, before he was with Milwaukee, his career was almost dead. If we're being honest about it, he was playing in New York. He didn't look that good.
When you're playing in New York, your career is basically over.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Like, how much of it is you? How much of it is playing? But that's the reality. Is that it looked like Bobby Portis was almost done, and Bobby Portis has said this since he's came to Milwaukee that they really made him feel like he's going to be he's important and that he's going to be a key part of the team, and it didn't really show. I mean, over the course of the season, his role kind of fluctuated a bit. But so this isn't really someone that stood out from a box score perspective. It's kind of basically he was kind of their energy, and you talk about Giannis is obviously your leader on both ends of the court and is going to bring that energy and passion on a nightly basis. But I think you need more than just one guy to do that. And Bobby Portis was really that other guy, I think, from just both ends of the court and high energy, just kind of that passion for the game. And, you have to at least have a big enough impact to get, like, T-shirts, like, just your name. just Bobby t-shirts. I mean, that's just kind of goes to show like the impact overall yet on the fan base. I mean, I think the fans, I speak to this, really have gravitated towards and loved him, and I am ecstatic that they brought him back because I think that would have been a bigger loss than a lot of people would have given would have thought had he not returned to Milwaukee. So I'm ecstatic that Bobby Portis is back.
That is way too much Bobby Portis talk for one episode.
Hey, need to talk about Bobby Portis.
I was not impressed by his 47% 3-point percentage. Not impressed at all by that average. Shooting almost 2.5 a game too, so actually pretty impressive there. But yeah, I mean, to me it is Drew Holiday, and I was a fan of this, and we both picked them to win the championship preseason last year, so we both. You might have been a little biased towards it, so I don't like agreeing with you on it, but we both picked them, but I really liked the pairing. But if we're being honest about it, it's still surprising that Drew Holiday came in and had as much of an impact as he did. I mean, we were talking about this franchise absolutely crumbling a year ago. Was Giannis going to stay? And that was what we talked about the entire episode last year. Is Budenholzer going to be fired? Is Giannis going to stay? And Drew Holiday was very key defensively in the playoffs. And without him, they wouldn't have won this championship. And for him, and he's been a very above average, borderline all-star player throughout the course of his career. But for him to come in and have a championship level impact, I don't care what anyone says, it's impressive. And we could have said
he is the second best guard defender behind Ben Simmons.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he proved that throughout the playoffs. He came up clutch when they needed him to. So I think to me it's still him. As much as we could have said this is a great pair, and a lot of people love the pairing. I know you didn't, but there's a lot of people out there that liked it. But did we really think that Drew Holiday? We're not talking about some superstar level player like LeBron likes to bring in to his teams. We're talking a guy like Drew Holiday had that kind of impact on a team. I think there's a lot to be said about that, and I think it was an impressive season overall for him. So. Let's talk about this offseason. How do you follow up a championship season? Obviously, they have championship expectations. Through the draft, they had 2 draft picks here, and both of them, their names are almost impossible to pronounce. I think that's just their thing between Giannis and now Sandro and Georgios. Okay, fine. You want me to try to say Sandro's last name, so it's definitely Mamouk. I'm sticking with Mamouk for the first part of his last name. But Mamouk Asheville. Mamouk.
There's 2
Oh, there's an I. Mamouk Vashiliae. Nope, not feeling that. And then you have Georgios Kalitzikes. Okay. That's what I'm gonna stick with. But okay,
those are their pronunciations is the biggest impact they're gonna have.
You don't know. People would have said that about Giannis too. But they were 54 and 60 overall, so maybe a little bit of a difference there. But let's see. Additions. George Hill is back for the 15th time. I didn't really even know he left. Seems like he never really left.
Player to ever come out of IUPUI.
And probably the last. George Hill, Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye. Key losses. Elijah Bryant scored 16 points in a game for them one time, and he's gone. Bryn Forbes, Sam Merrill, and PJ Tucker. So obviously the big loss there is PJ Tucker, who has at least one good playoff game every single season. So I don't know how they're going to move on from that. But Caveman, as a Bucks fan, is this the kind of off season you would have hoped for?
I mean, the reality is I think they did what. I mean, losing PJ Tucker does hurt. I'm not gonna. He was a key piece on the defensive end. He's been a good defender pretty much his entire career. He's been good defensively, so that's gonna be a loss. But the reality is they did They did very minor moves because I think they were in the owners that took over this team a couple years ago kind of have the right mindset. They're not going to mess with a good thing. They just won the championship. They're not going to do anything too drastic. I really think their biggest move, in my opinion, was retaining Bobby Portis. I went on talking about him for 10 minutes. But I mean, just a bunch of like solid depth moves. George Hill's back. He kind of him replacing Bryn Forbes. That's kind of what it's a lateral move there. Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye. These are all gonna be like quality bench depth pieces. To give their big three, and we haven't really mentioned Chris Middleton's name yet. Really.
Who?
But they're just gonna be depth behind their big three. So there's kind of it's quiet, but when you're fresh off a championship season, I think the best off season you can have is a quiet off season. I think that's the reality of it.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, when you look at it, what needs did they really have? I mean, they were top 10 offensively and defensively. They weren't the strongest three-point shooting team, so maybe you would like to see them add another shooter. Realistic,
three-point shooter.
solid. He hasn't done much the last 2 seasons now, Rodney Hood, but he has historically been a pretty solid three-point shooter.
George Hill
then yeah,
a year or two ago in 3-point percentage.
Yeah, George Hill, I think, definitely helps that second unit because that was one of the question marks for me heading into this off season for them was, who's leading that second unit and are they going to have depth? Because, I mean, the reality is you can talk all you want about it, but we saw how important depth was to a lot of these teams when they had their star players go down. And, I don't want the Nets to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. But I would really like to see the Nets and Bucks play in a 7-game series. I think that would be really fun because I think they're so different, and I think it would be very intriguing all the way around. In the finals, though, the Eastern Conference Finals, fully healthy, both teams.
Oh.
That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. You made me be very specific, Caveman. You knew what I meant. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there, and I don't necessarily buy into this because the Bucks fought hard for this, but there's a lot of people that said the championship was cheap because of how many star players went down, and arguably the Bucks were the only team that, I mean, Giannis did go down, but not for an extended period of time. So they were, one of the only teams that didn't have to deal with a major loss. So some people think it's a little cheap. I don't know if I'd quite go that far because they're constructed like a championship team and they're going to be competitive.
How do you control injuries that happen to other players?
Yeah, no, that's why it's not their fault.
That brings up a good point, and the reality is like people like to take away and kind of I feel like whenever LeBron's not in it, people just look to discredit any championship.
You gotta look to hate somebody.
Look at like LeBron's on it. Okay, we have to find another way to discredit this championship. But the reality is, I mean, how can you knock the Bucks championship because other teams got hurt? That's just one thing I don't really like, using other team injuries as an excuse to lessen the championship. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, injuries are a part of the game, and injuries happen. Like,
yeah,
this doesn't make much sense.
Yep, I agree with you. So I mean, it's still, you can't take the championship away from them. It doesn't really matter how it happened if we're being honest about it. So yeah. I don't think I have much else to say. I just think it's an interesting point of conversation because everybody kept bringing it up. Let's talk about their depth chart a little bit. not much has changed here, but their starters: Drew Holiday, Dante DiVincenzo, Chris Middleton, Giannis, Brook
They didn't have. And I
Lopez.
just want to say, people, you want to clown on what you want, but the Bucks, Bucks didn't have DiVincenzo for they didn't have their starting one of their starters for the finals. And clown how much of an people can say he doesn't have much of an impact, but they did. They also, it's not like they also dealt with losing a key piece as well.
Yeah, definitely. Then Brook Lopez. Then in the backcourt, coming off the bench, you have George Hill, Pat Connaughton, Grayson Allen, Jordan Nwora. Behind Chris Middleton, pretty much the same guys except add Rodney Hill in there. In the front court, Bobby Portis, Semi Ojeleye will be behind those two. Sandro, they have listed as a backup a few spots behind Brook Lopez as well. So, I mean, the only thing you could say is it's like any other team and how they're constructed, though. This team, I mean, I personally wouldn't be thrilled with the Bucks' depth if I was a fan, and I think there's teams that are deeper than them. But the reality is, defensively, they're really deep. When you're talking about offensively, George Hill is probably going to have a huge impact coming off that bench for them, and I think that was a pretty critical move for them this offseason to fill in that piece of who's going to be handling the ball in the second unit. But I mean, the reality is, if they lost Middleton, Giannis, or Drew Holiday, this is a team, it would be tougher for them to win a championship. So, as much as I say maybe I don't love their depth, I mean, the reality is it's very strong defensively.
Yeah, and it goes back to when you're fresh off a championship, do you really want to make any major moves to shake it up? And I think their depth is pretty much what it was last season.
Yeah.
They have pretty much the same team, and this same team with this same depth pretty much won a championship. So the reality is no matter how much depth you have, if you lose one of your stars, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because they're your stars for a reason, and there is a drop off no matter how much depth that you have. There's going to be a drop off from your star to the down to the next level. So if any of those three, if they would have lost, if Drew Holiday were to go down, if Middleton were to go down, obviously, if Giannis were to go down, this team's maybe barely makes the playoffs. But I mean, your star goes down, you're going to be hurting, and that doesn't matter. And that's regardless of how much depth you have. So I'm happy with it because they didn't mess with the good things. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And I mean, this is a team for me that's kind of hard to analyze because when you're looking at it, if you could make this episode 2 minutes, you could say, they lost a few guys, but they filled them in with guys that are probably pretty close to what they had last year. They won a championship last year. They're going to compete for one this year. I mean, that's just the reality of the team. That's why I don't know.
We can't make it a 2-minute episode, so we kind of.
No, that's no fun. So that's why, you have to bring up storylines like did they deserve it and things like that. But the reality is when you're looking at next season, the reason I think it'll be tougher for them to go back to back is I think the Eastern Conference has gotten a lot better and I think it's getting stronger top to bottom. So, I don't want to say they cruised through the playoffs because they definitely didn't, but we saw how hard of an out even the Hawks were last season. So the Hawks come back strong. The Celtics are getting better. The Hornets are getting better. The Bulls are going to be competitive. You got some of those young teams like the Pistons that are going to be up and coming the next few seasons. It's very hard to repeat when you have this kind of depth in a conference. And I think that's a reality. That's their biggest obstacle, I think. It's not really that they've gotten better or worse. It's just I think the conference as a whole has gotten better.
Yeah, and that's the reality. And the reality is there's a reason why the Nets are favored to win the championship. I get it. Although with the Nets, that Kyrie situation is very interesting to monitor. And if Kyrie misses a lot of time this season, I mean, and I get James Harden wasn't James Harden in that series, and there wasn't James Harden. I get it, but the reality is he was still there. He still you still had to account for him as even if he was just like a decoy. But yeah, the reality is it's going to be, and this is the same thing with any team. It's always tough to repeat. The old cliche of you're gonna get every team's best shot on a nightly basis. You know, all those cliches are true. But the reality is the Eastern Conference runs through Milwaukee and Brooklyn next. And that's just kind of how it is. And the Bucks are gonna be they're championship contenders. As long as this big three stays intact and they continue to do what they've been doing, they're gonna be now they're not gonna be good forever. I mean, a couple of their Middleton and Drew Holiday aren't like young anymore, but for at least the next couple seasons, the Bucks are gonna be on top of the Eastern Conference. So. And they definitely have a chance to repeat. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, they're going to repeat as champs. But I think they could. And I obviously I haven't made any definite predictions on who's going to win the finals. But this is one, I can't objectively say how the Bucks are gonna do next season. Because
are you saying you're biased?
Okay. I mean, obviously.
I just want to hear you say it.
But I'm not gonna say the word. I'm gonna let you point out the obvious here. But
okay.
I mean, you don't have to be. You can be on the outside looking in and realize that the Bucks are going to be competing for a title next season. They have championship. Yeah. They have as good of a chance as anybody does of winning title next
season. I don't really care about anything else in this episode except that you just admitted you're biased. That's literally all I got out of this 20 minutes. But no, you're right. Like I said, the reality is you can analyze and break this down any way that you want, but the reality is this is a very similar team to last year. So I mean, they're going to be at least in the running. They're going to be a Final Four team in the Eastern Conference. Realistically, I won't say a guaranteed Eastern Conference Finals teams because I don't want to jinx it for you. But you're right. The path leads through Brooklyn and Milwaukee until someone proves otherwise. At this point, if we're being honest about it, we can talk about all these young and upcoming teams and is it going to be easy to get there? Are they going to sweep their way through? No, definitely not. The Hawks proved that last year, but I mean, they're the most talented team or the second most talented team, whoever your preference is in the Eastern Conference. So that's kind of the reality here. So even though they're the champs, I think it's a little unexciting if we're being honest about it. So I think that's it for the Milwaukee Bucks then. And I'm looking forward to, you brought it up, and I've kind of been thinking about it in the back of my head, who I'm predicting to go all the way and who my playoff teams are going to be. And I'm looking forward to doing that because I think it's going to be fun to actually go through and create our standings. So make sure you guys subscribe. That'll be coming up just before the season starts. So subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you don't miss any of the content we have coming up. We'll see you guys next time.